In the year 330 AD, a momentous decision changed the course of history. On a vast ancient land where east met west, Emperor Constantine stood at the crossroads of empires. His vision was bold, some might even say audacious. He sought to transform a city, one that would embody the grandeur of Rome but be bathed in the influences of the East. This city, Constantinople, would rise above the ancient world, towering in beauty, wealth, and culture, becoming the heart of a new empire. It was here, on the shores of the Bosporus, that the Byzantine Empire took its first breath. Constantine's Constantinople wasn't just a relocation of Rome, it was a statement. As Rome in the West began to stumble under the weight of internal strife and external threats, Constantinople blossomed. The city streets were lined with opulent palaces, towering churches, and bustling markets filled with merchants from distant lands. Silk from China, spices from India, and gold from Africa flowed into this vibrant hub. People from all corners of the world mingled, bringing their languages, customs, and religions. The empire was, in every sense, a blend of cultures, a place where Greek wisdom met Roman law, where Christian faith took root in the ancient soil of pagan traditions. The rulers who followed Constantine inherited this dazzling city and empire. Justinian, one of the most famous of the Byzantine emperors, saw it not only as his inheritance, but as his mission to expand and solidify its place in history. He dreamed of restoring the Roman Empire to its former glory, and through his reign, Constantinople reached new heights. But his vision wasn't just limited to territorial expansion. Within the walls of the city, an unparalleled architectural marvel was born. The Hagia Sophia, a church so magnificent that it seemed to touch the heavens. Its vast dome shimmered with mosaics of gold, and its halls echoed with hymns and prayers, enveloping all who entered in a divine atmosphere. But it wasn't just faith and splendor that defined Justinian's reign. His efforts to consolidate power led him to craft the Corpus Juris Civilis, a codification of Roman law that would endure for centuries. This legal code became a foundation upon which modern legal systems were built, showing that the Byzantine legacy wasn't merely in bricks and mortar, but in the very principles that governed society. Yet, as with all stories of power, there were moments when the empire trembled. A force beyond human comprehension descended upon the empire during Justinian's reign. A devastating plague swept through the streets, claiming the lives of thousands. Constantinople's once bustling markets fell silent as the shadow of death loomed large. But even in the face of such calamities, the city endured. It seemed that nothing could bring down the spirit of Byzantium. Generations passed and the empire evolved. The emperors of the Byzantine realm faced challenges from all sides, shifting alliances, new powers rising from the deserts of Arabia, and old enemies that still lurked in the shadows of Europe. But Constantinople remained steadfast, its towering walls a testament to the resilience of its people. One of the empire's greatest assets was its cunning ability to survive through diplomacy. Byzantine emperors often found themselves at the negotiating table, making pacts with distant kingdoms and offering lavish gifts to potential rivals. It was a game of survival, one in which words and wit often carried as much weight as armies. As the centuries unfolded, the empire saw a blend of triumphs and setbacks. There was a time when the Byzantine Empire stretched across vast territories, its influence touching the edges of the Mediterranean and beyond. The mosaics and frescoes in Constantinople depicted this golden era, with emperors crowned in splendor, surrounded by advisors and generals. And yet, even as it glittered, shadows began to grow on the horizon. The rise of new powers in the East, particularly the forces from the Arabian Peninsula, challenged Byzantine authority. These new rivals were driven by their own faith, culture, and ambitions. For the first time in centuries, Constantinople felt the pressure of not just surviving, but reimagining its place in the world. Still, the city stood. It weathered attacks, navigated treaties, and leaned heavily on its formidable walls, which had protected it from external threats time and again. By the 10th century, under emperors like Basil II, often remembered for his strategic prowess, the Byzantine Empire saw a resurgence. It wasn't just a revival of territory, it was a revival of culture, art, and intellectual thought. The empire became a beacon once again, as artists, philosophers, and theologians gathered in the courts, weaving together the rich tapestry of Byzantine knowledge and culture. This period of Renaissance brought with it great achievements, but it also sowed the seeds of internal discord. Power struggles between the aristocracy and the ruling emperors, combined with the growing influence of external powers, began to erode the unity that had held Byzantium together for so long. Over time, the strains became more visible. The empire's vast territories, once a source of wealth and strength, were increasingly difficult to manage. Rivals grew bolder, and even allies turned their gaze toward the riches of Constantinople. The city's famed walls had withstood many sieges, but no fortress could forever hold out against the shifting tides of history. The Crusades, initially intended to aid Byzantium, eventually became a double-edged sword. Western forces, lured by the splendors of the East, found themselves drawn into the complex politics of the empire. And in 1204, the unthinkable happened. Constantinople fell, not to an external enemy, but to forces from within Christendom itself. For a time, the empire fragmented. Constantinople was no longer the shining capital, but a city under foreign rule. Yet, even in its darkest hour, there remained a glimmer of hope. The Byzantine spirit had not been extinguished. By the mid-13th century, the city was recaptured. And though much had been lost, the empire persisted, smaller and more fragile than before. The final chapters of Byzantium's story are tinged with melancholy, but also with remarkable resilience. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the once great empire had been reduced to little more than the city of Constantinople and a few outlying territories. The Ottoman Turks, a rising power from the east, gradually surrounded the city. Their presence loomed large, and it became clear that the days of Byzantine dominance were coming to an end. But even as Constantinople's fate became more uncertain, its people clung to the remnants of their proud heritage. Scholars fled the city, carrying with them the wisdom of the ancient world, helping to ignite the spark of the Renaissance in the West. In 1453, after centuries of defying the odds, Constantinople faced its final challenge. The walls that had once repelled countless enemies now stood against the might of the Ottoman forces. The siege lasted for weeks, and though the defenders fought valiantly, the outcome seemed inevitable. On a spring morning in May, the city that had once been the jewel of the ancient world was breached. Constantinople fell, and with it, the last vestiges of the Byzantine Empire disappeared into history. But though the empire was gone, its legacy endured. Its culture, its art, its contributions to law, and its preservation of ancient knowledge all left an indelible mark on the world. Byzantium was more than just an empire. It was a bridge between worlds, a place where East met West, where old traditions were reimagined, and where the spirit of resilience triumphed, even in the face of ultimate defeat. The echoes of its story can still be felt today in the architecture of its churches, in the laws that govern modern nations, and in the very idea that even the mightiest of empires can rise, fall, and yet leave behind something far greater than territory. A legacy of endurance and influence that transcends time. As the twilight of the Byzantine Empire drew near, its long history seemed to merge into the very stones of Constantinople, a city that had endured the ebb and flow of countless tides. Those final centuries were a delicate balance of hope and inevitability, a dance between tradition and transformation. The Byzantine Empire, though reduced in size, still clung to its identity, preserving the core of what had once been a vast dominion. In those later years, Constantinople was no longer the center of an expansive empire, but it was still a beacon of culture, faith, and learning. The city was a living museum, its streets lined with the remnants of its former grandeur. The domes of churches sparkled in the sunlight, and within their walls the faithful gathered, not just to worship, but to bear witness to their shared history. The Hagia Sophia, though worn with age, still stood as a symbol of Byzantine faith and architectural brilliance, its golden mosaics reflecting the divine light in a world increasingly shadowed by the approach of new powers. One of the most striking aspects of the Byzantine people during this era was their fierce connection to their heritage. Though many of the empire's territories had been lost, they still saw themselves as the heirs to the Roman legacy. Theirs was a lineage of emperors, philosophers, and saints. The scholars of Constantinople continued to study the ancient texts, safeguarding the wisdom of the Greeks and Romans. In the monasteries, monks meticulously copied manuscripts, ensuring that the knowledge of the past would not be lost to the ravages of time. This intellectual preservation would prove to be one of Byzantium's most enduring gifts to the world. When scholars fled the city before its fall, they carried with them these treasures,